Hi, my name is Gloria Hom, and I'm so excited about this election. This election is a very challenging one, and the voter handbook is 217 pages for just the state propositions. Now, the reason why the state propositions, there's so many on the ballot, is because this is democracy by petition. That basically, uh, the people have put on many of these issues on the ballot. And I get excited about it because we have a glimpse of what the people are thinking at any one particular time. And that's why elections on the propositions are so exciting. Now, we have 17 statewide propositions and 2 county propositions, which I'm going to go over with you. And I hope you don't get voter fatigue and you actually look further down. We have a bond, which is Proposition 52. We have constitutional amendments, which requires 8% of the votes cast in the last general election. And then we have initiatives, which requires 5% of those who cast a vote in the last gubernatorial election. And the reason why we have so many propositions is because the number of votes cast in the last gubernatorial election was very low. And because it was low, it was easier to get the required number of signatures to qualify for this particular ballot. And, you know, my concern is that you don't get ballot fatigue and you continue to vote. Let's go to Proposition 51. It's another school bond. I'm sure many of you are acquainted with school bonds. It's for $9 billion. $7 billion of the $9 billion go to K-12 and $2 billion go for the community college. Now, this is not for operations. It can't be used to hire teachers or pay for educational programs. It's used for construction primarily, to buy land, repair old buildings, and construct new ones. It's $500 million a year for the interest only, and the total cost will be $17.6 billion. Now, Proposition 52 is an interesting proposition, and it has to do with the state fees on hospitals. This is probably the most complex proposition. Medicare provides health care benefits to 13 million Californians. And in order to get matching funds, the state has to put up some money. So what they have done is they have the hospitals put up the matching funds, and then it's approved by the lawmakers. Well, Proposition 52 has made the fee permanent. The reason for this is because in 2009, the hospitals felt that they weren't getting all the money that they could be getting with the matching funds from the federal government. So they said, okay, we'll put up the money in terms of hospital fees. So they did, in fact, put up the money. But in 2011, the state ran out of money, took the fees, and spent it elsewhere. So the hospitals said, well, that really isn't fair. So they put this on the ballot to make the fees permanent. And should the hospitals, should the state decide on a different formula for the fees, then they would have to have a vote by 2/3 of the legislature, as opposed to 50%. So basically, that's what 52 is. Like I said, it is a complex proposition, but you know, all the parties are for it. The Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the Union came on later, the Chamber of Commerce, etc. So it seems like a really positive proposition. Proposition 53 is on revenue bonds. Now, there are 2 kinds of bonds. One is a general obligation bond. A general obligation bond is paid from our taxes. A revenue bond is paid back by the fees charged on the project. And this says that if a revenue bond is greater than $2 billion, then it gives a chance for the voters to vote on it. the voters of the entire state and not just the local entity. I mean, this would be a bond, for example, high-speed rail. It would be a bond for the aqueducts. It would be a bond for a stadium, for example, that is greater than $2 billion, so that this would allow people in the entire state of California to vote on this bond. And that is Proposition 53, I'm sorry. Proposition 54 is a change in the legislative process. It's an initiative, it's a constitutional amendment. What happens is the legislature goes up to Sacramento and they talk about a bill, they put the bill, and just before they vote on the bill, it's gutted and it's amended. And so the people who are watching that bill think that they're voting on one bill, but they're actually voting on the bill with that title, but it's not the same bill. So what Proposition 54 does, it says it has to be it has to be on internet for 72 hours and in print. So we, the people, have greater transparency, or, you know, we know what the legislature is voting on 72 hours before the vote comes. And that's Proposition 54. Proposition 55 is a tax extension on the wealthy. You know, we've had this. It passed in 2012. And quite frankly, it was for 6 years to expire in 2018. Well, before it expires, they want it to extend for another 13 years, which means that, you know, this bill would have, this tax extension on the wealthy would be for actually 25 years. The reason why they brought it to you this year is because it's a presidential election, and people feel that that more people will be at the polls and more people will actually vote for this. This bill is, when they say the wealthy, it's actually $250,000 for a single filer, $340,000 for a head of household, and $500,000 for a joint household. This raises about 89% goes to K-12 and 11% goes to the community college. The fear of this bill certainly is that the schools will count on that particular money, and after 25 years they probably would say that it's permanent as opposed to being a temporary tax. And, you know, I just caution you about, you know, what is a temporary tax? Is a temporary tax ever a temporary tax, or do we extend it for many years to come? Moving right along, we have Proposition 56, and that is that's a cigarette tax, another cigarette tax. It's an excise tax for $2 on a pack of cigarettes, and the tax will go for health care and educational programs. There's no question that cigarette taxes have caused many people to stop smoking and, you know, create a public policy. The question is, have we reached a point of diminishing returns that the $2 tax may not stop that many more people from smoking? It may, you know, a pack of cigarettes now costs $6. Well, and it'll cost greater than $6. And it may encourage people to have a black market or an internet market for cigarettes, or go across state lines to buy cigarettes. But that's what Proposition 56 is all about, and it's about increasing the tax on a pack of cigarettes by $2. Proposition 57 is put on the ballot by Jerry Brown, and we all know that there's overcrowding in our jails. And this one is to solve the problem, or at least alleviate the problem of overcrowding. And what it says basically is that adults convicted of nonviolent felonies are eligible parole after they serve a minimum sentence. And so inmates will also have an opportunity to reduce their sentence by good behavior and education. There's another part of this proposition, and it has to do with youth. And today, that youth can be tried in adult court by the district attorney. If this passes, that a judge will have to decide whether a youth would be tried in an adult court or juvenile court. So basically, Proposition 57 is to allow criminals, nonviolent criminals, to be on parole earlier. Now, moving right along to Proposition 58. 58 is an interesting proposition, and is to bring back bilingual education in our schools. In 1998, bilingual education was, we passed a proposition that limited the use of bilingual education, and that was Prop 227. And what this does, it repeals Proposition 227 by restoring bilingual education in our schools. And bilingual education is not just Spanish, English, but it's other nationalities. You know, like in Palo Alto, I just read that we have 47 different languages spoken in our schools. So bilingual education would mean that a parent from another country, like China, for example, would be teaching in another language besides English, and it would repeal Proposition 227. Proposition 59. Proposition 59 is an advisory proposition, and basically in the year 2010, the Supreme Court ruled on Citizens United versus Federal Election Committee, and it allowed corporations as well as unions as well as whoever to accumulate funds for campaign finance, as much funds as they wanted to do. This does absolutely nothing. Proposition 59 is advisory. It's like taking a survey, and it sends a message, but it really does nothing more. And even our governor said it's a waste of time. Proposition 60. Proposition 60 is on condom use. And so if you're making a porno film in California, that men have to wear a condom. It requires it as a safety regulation. So adult filmmakers have to get a license to make sure that their performers are wearing a condom during their filming. Proposition 61. Proposition 61 is on state prescription drug purchases. And basically what it does, it says that the state prescription drug purchases for Medi-Cal patients, for state employees, and for prisoners should not exceed the limit of what the Department of Veterans Affairs pays. This doesn't apply to managed care system. The reason for this is because we all know that drug cost has gone up, and the Department of Veterans Affairs pays the lowest rate of the cost of drugs. And the reason why they pay the lowest rate is because of economies of scale, that they buy multi-size volumes of these particular drugs. If this goes in, it says that our state agencies will pay the same low rate. And of course, that's going to help our Medicare and our Medicare patients. The problem with this is that drug companies may not want to sell anymore at that low rate. Suppliers may not want to sell at that low rate. And also, they may raise the rate for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Those are some of the counter arguments on this particular proposition. Okay, now we get to the death penalty. Now, we've done this proposition before, and we know that the last execution was in 2006, and 748 prisoners are now awaiting the death penalty. They are housed in a different prison, and it's a very expensive situation. Well, this eliminates the death penalty and imposes life imprisonment forever without possibility of parole. And they do work when they're in prison, and their pay from their work is now 50% is deducted for restitution. If this passes, 70% will be deducted for restitution. So, Proposition 63 is a Gavin Newsom proposition, and it strengthens our existing gun laws. Many of the proposals in this proposition have already been enacted. What this does, it has background checks not only if you buy a gun, but now if you buy ammunition. And this starts on January 1st in 2017. There'll be a new court process for felons and those that are mentally ill to buy ammunition. And it prohibits gun magazines and gun clips. Moving right along to 64 is the legalization of marijuana. And we've seen this before, the legalization of marijuana. We've had medical marijuana since 1996. It puts limits on recreational marijuana in terms of possession, growing, and selling marijuana. And it will tax the retail amount sold. Now, some states have already done this. We have not. But this is only for recreational marijuana. Moving on to Proposition 65 has to do with carryout bags. It's an initiative. It's quite interesting. Actually, we passed the carryout bag law in 2014. And we said in 2014 that stores have to charge for one-time use carryout bags. But it didn't go into effect because we have a referendum, which I'll talk about, which is 67, started by the bag companies as well as individuals. And what this says, Proposition 65 only says that the money that is collected from the sale of these one-time use bags will, instead of going to the retailer, will go into a state account for environmental projects, rather than having the retailer keep the money. And so it doesn't get rid of the bags. It doesn't get rid of the law. It just says that instead of the money going to the retailer and the stores, it'll go to environmental projects, and it'll go to the state, and they will decide on the environmental projects. Proposition 66. Now, that's an interesting one because this one does not, this one does the death penalty, but it rushes it along. Since 1978, 15 people have been executed, 103 people have died waiting, because it takes between 15 and 25 years to go through all the legal challenges. What Proposition 66 does, it shortens the time, that there's a 5-year term, a 5-year limit on the time that they start the process and they end the process. The legal challenges will not go to the Supreme Court, but to the lower courts, and then eventually end up at the Supreme Court. And the inmates will be housed in the state prison with the regular inmates, as opposed to be housed separately in a separate prison. So it's kind of like if you were looking at Proposition 62, where you're doing away with the death penalty, then you're putting the brakes on the death penalty. And then if you're looking at Proposition 66, it actually is putting your foot on the accelerator on the death penalty. And so it's an interesting look at the two death penalty propositions. Proposition 67 has to do with an overturn of the plastic bag referendum. And basically, one should be very careful about referendums, because if you vote yes on Proposition 67, you are saying you want to keep the law as it is, which means that we're going to ban plastic bags. If you vote no on the no to the referendum, you are saying that the stores will keep the money, and the stores will keep the money, as opposed to having the state collect the money and give it to an environmental cause. Now, if both passes, then the proposition with the greater amount of votes will determine where the money goes. So if you vote for the former proposition, Proposition 65, the money will go to a state agency that deals with environmental issues, or an environmental group. And if you vote for 67, the retailer will keep the money. But you have to vote no on 67 for the retailer to keep the money, not a yes vote. Now we have two state propositions, two county propositions. And the county proposition is Proposition A and Proposition B. The first one is on housing. It's a bond, it's a general obligation bond to provide affordable housing. But actually, if you look at this bond carefully, that I think it's 19% goes to housing, and the rest actually goes to social services, homeless services. So it does have citizens oversight, and it does have regular audits. It's like all of the issues, there's actually good in all of them, but not all the money goes to housing. And so I caution you to really look at this Measure A in terms of where does the money go. Measure B is the Valley Transportation Authority. This is a 30-year half-cent sales tax. And the first thing it says, it's to repair our potholes. Actually, only about 1.3, not all of the money goes to repair our potholes. Most of the money goes to finish BART. as opposed to repair our potholes. I think it's 19% or 13% goes to repair our potholes, and a greater amount goes for BART. It does do some money for improving our bicycles and also the Caltrains. It relieves traffic and it enhances transit for some seniors, students, and the disabled. There is an audit and there is some transparency. So with that, I have covered all of the propositions and the 2 county ballots, and I hope that it has been helpful to you and it has been interesting. And please go out and vote, and you know, please be as excited about this election as I am. Thank you very much.